Hello, my name is Mark Felton, and I serve on the City of Edina's Human Rights and Relations Commission. Welcome to a conversation on race, justice, and policing, put on by the Human Rights and Relations Commission. After the death of George Floyd this past Memorial Day, many Minnesota communities were like powder cakes on the verge of exploding. There were concerns among some Edina residents that our community could be next to explode. A curfew went into effect. Businesses closed early and boarded up their windows. But curfews and boarded up windows treated the symptoms, and the mayor and city council believed something needed to be done to get to the underlying cause of the pain and the outrage felt by the members of our community. The mayor and city council felt that perhaps one way of getting to the source of the pain was through community conversations. Therefore, they directed the Human Rights and Relations Commission to organize and facilitate a community conversation on race, justice, and policing. Hence, the purpose of tonight's event is to provide an opportunity for some of the panelists to converse with Police Chief David Nelson and Police Sergeant Dave Venny from the Edina Police Department and share their experiences with race, justice, and policing. Now, we know this event will not fully unpack all the complex layers associated with these issues, but this event is a start for the Edina community to hear different perspectives and different experiences and talk about how to learn from them and move forward together. In addition, you will hear from the other panelists about their perspectives and experiences on race, justice, and policing in Edina. Dietrich Nissen will moderate the discussion. The entire event will last exactly 90 minutes. In the first half hour, the city's Race and Equity Coordinator and liaison to the Human Rights and Relations Commission, Heidi Lee, will provide a brief overview on Edina's history and racial demographics. Heidi will be followed by Chief Nelson and Sergeant Venny, who will provide an update on the police department's race and equity work over these past several years. The next 45 minutes will be the panel discussion, and the remaining 15 minutes will be reserved for Q&A from the public. To ask questions, send it via email to MJ Layman. And her address is mlamon@edinamn.gov. Now, Dietrich Nissen will also give these instructions again later in the program. At this time, I would like to turn the program over to the city's Race and Equity Coordinator and liaison to the Human Rights and Relations Commission, Heidi Lee. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone who is participating and watching this event. The topics of race, justice, and policing has been an ongoing conversation. As Commissioner Felton said earlier, this event will not fully unpack the complex layers of each of these issues they have singularly as well as collectively. However, this is the start to unravel the different intersections of each issue with each other. When the words race, justice, and policing come to mind, each person may have their own definition of those words as a result of their life experiences. Those life experiences provide historical connection on how a person's definition and view of race, justice, and policing. This conversation will hopefully allow each person to provide their definition and context. So in order to make progress in the conversation about race, justice, and policing, historical context must be given to provide common knowledge, such as an overview of Edina and its moments connected to race. The overview doesn't detail the entire history of Edina, but some of the important moments. And this timeline can also be found on the city's website. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so again, the timeline that I'm providing is available on the city's website. And so to give that overview, in March of 1888, Edina was founded by a community of Black and white families. There was approximately 13 Black pioneer families that settled in Edina. Of those families, the Yancey family, namely Beverly Claiborne Yancey, or better known as BC, and his wife Ellen, along with their children, was one of those pioneer families. So moving into during April 1920 through the 1940s, descendants of the Black families that originally settled in Edina started to move out. And there was a noticeable shift that Edina started to become mostly a white village. As it was indicated as early as 1924, there was racial restrictions that first appeared on on residential properties. However, in 1968, the Federal Housing Act was passed by Congress that prohibits the practice of redlining and racial covenants into deeds. Now, between that time in October of 1950, the Morningside neighborhood opens its doors to anyone who wanted to buy property in that area, and a small Jewish community settles into the neighborhood. In 1970 of July, the Human Rights and Relations Commission is formed. Just recently, the HRC celebrated their 50th anniversary and was recognized by City Council in a proclamation. Tom Oy, who was awarded with the Prize for Humanity by the Immortal Chaplains, was awarded that in 2003 and was also a member of the HRC. And lastly, in 2018, the Race and Equity Implementation Plan was developed and approved by the City Council as a result of the Race and Equity Task Force research and recommendations. And the reason why I wanted to share some of these highlights and not go over the entire overview is that these are just a few moments in the history of Edina that have shaped the city through the lens of race and equity. It is an indication that the community demographics, such as race and ethnicity, will also continue to change. And I do have another demographics here that I want to share with you all. As you listen and watch this conversation on race, justice, and policing, it takes a timeline based on from 1980, 1990, 2000, and the 2010 census, as well as the estimated population in 2019. There has been growth in people of color living in Edina, as well as the overall growth population continues to grow. As the race and ethnic demographics continue to change, the diverse and multiple perspectives will continue in this community in many different areas, such as race, justice, and policing. I hope that the brief overview will provide historical context as you continue to listen to this conversation. I thank you for the opportunity to provide this history as well as the race and ethnic demographic information. I look forward to listening to the panelists share their perspectives and experience so the community can come together to learn and make change together. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi, for that overview of Edina's history and racial demographics. Next up is Chief Nelson and Sergeant Vinny, who will provide an update on the police department's race and equity work these past several years. Please welcome Chief Nelson and Sergeant Vinny.
Good evening, and thanks for having us as a part of this panel. I think it's a great opportunity to have a starting point with this. I'm going to talk a little bit about our race and equity plan or work plan in Edina. All the items that will come up on this slide are actually part of the recommendations from the Race and Equity Initiative final report that was dated May 15th of 2018 and presented to our City Council. So we started putting these initiatives, basically, or these recommendations onto our work plans in 2019. So the first one on there is evaluate the feasibility and advisability of increasing the amount of police community data collected by the city. So in evaluating this recommendation, we've come to realize that our current records managed system is not capable of accurately entering and extracting racial demographic information. The system was purchased in 2007, and at that time, collecting racial demographics was not a high priority as it is today. So as a part of our work plan for this year, we're researching new records management systems, and we'll be looking at a system that has more data collection capabilities, specifically racial demographics. The system is budgeted to be replaced in 2021. In our meetings so far with potential vendors, all of the vendors have recognized the importance of this feature and have solutions to accomplish this type of collection. So in recognizing the importance of being fiscally responsible, we believe that it would be more feasible and advisable to incorporate this into a new records management system versus researching and purchasing a short-term solution. On the next one to pop up here, we have our crime report policy. The police department will conduct a review of the crime report policy for posting individuals' names on the department's website. So this also became part of our work plan in 2019, and it has been completed as we no longer post names of people in any portion of our weekly crime report. So on the third one, there it is. Upon reviewing the police department policy manual and removing non-public information, the manual will be placed on the city's website. So this project started in 2019, and we found that it would be a very cumbersome project to go through all of our policies. We have completed that. They've been updated and are maintain compliance with the Minnesota Peace Officer Standardized Training Board requirements. The manual has also been reviewed through a race and equity lens. And the vast majority of the Edina policy manual has been posted on our website for public viewing to increase transparency and continue to build in the community. That's it.
All right,
Thank
Chief,
you.
thanks. Yes. And I'm here to talk about our Neighborhood Engagement Officer program. It started a few years back. And the reason that this was created is it's basically designed to build relationship with the residents and prevent crime. We currently have 14 officers who are assigned to housing complexes and neighborhoods throughout the city. So some of the neighborhood engagement officer responsibilities would include attending block parties, touching base with the property manager or the neighborhood association leadership to discuss any issues or areas of concerns, and also to talk about upcoming events that we may be having in the community as well too. So with that comes the communication piece of it, and where we found that we were struggling a little bit and where we still have room to improve is this communication and getting the word out to the community. So recognizing that, we knew that we needed to expand our communication platforms to reach all of the members of our community. So we work really close with our communications department, and we have regular meetings to ensure that our efforts are reaching our community. And some of the venues that we're currently using are our website, the Nextdoor app, Facebook, Twitter, and there's also a few others that we're using too to try to make sure that we're getting the word out and getting ahead of the communication part of it. And then some of the programs that I'm really proud of that we do and that we've done for a long time, I'm going to try to highlight a few of these, but they've been in place for many years. And the reason our officers are involved in these efforts is because they want to serve our community. These events allow officers and residents an opportunity to get to know each other. And we understand that the more we know about each other, the easier it is to build rapport, build trust, and strengthen relationships. So I'm going to just touch on a few of our highlights that we're really proud of in our city. And one of them is Night to Unite. And Night to Unite is a national event that's hosted on the first Tuesday in August each year. And in 2019, we were able to attend over 90 block parties in Edina, which is significant. Unfortunately, because of COVID in 2020, we had to cancel, but we're looking forward to the event again in 2021. Another event that we are really proud of is Pizza with Police. And this event is made possible by Brew Pub Pizza, and it's held at Roslyn Park. And this is an interactive event, and it allows residents an opportunity to meet with our officers in person. And again, it builds those relationships, builds trust, and they're able to see us out in the public as well, too, which is pretty fun. We also have a junior police program. And again, this is a program that is made possible by the generosity of the Edina Crime Prevention Fund and the Morningside Rotary. This program teaches second and third grade students about the role of public servants in our community. And it also emphasizes safety at home, at school, and out in the community. And another event that we have that receives a lot of positive feedback is our Citizens Academy. And this is a 12-week program which gives an informative and interactive look behind the scenes of the Edina Police Department. And our students learn through lectures, demonstrations, and hands-on real-world training. And the feedback on this event has just been outstanding, and we will continue to do it once the pandemic leaves. We had to cancel, unfortunately, in 2020 as well, too. So, and again, there are a lot more programs like DARE and a few others that I want to highlight, but these are the big ones right now that I just wanted to kind of give a high-level overview, Dietrich, and make sure that I was able to talk about those. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Chief Nelson and Sergeant Vinny, for the update and the insight into the race and equity work that has been ongoing within the Edina Police Department. Now, I would like to formally introduce the moderator and the panelists for tonight's event. Now, as I call your name, please raise your hand for the audience. Dietrich Nissen, our moderator. And panelists, Arnie Bigby.
Oh,
Gary Bridges. Hope Melton. Sabi Mirza. Yep. David Nelson, Chief David Nelson, and Sergeant David Vinny. Now, I will turn the floor over to tonight's moderator, who will also share with the listening audience how to participate in the Q&A session. Please welcome to the floor the moderator of our panel discussion on race, justice, and policing in Edina, Mr. Dietrich Nissen.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dietrich Nissen. I'm a third-generation Edina resident, a current Edina business owner, and a former City of Edina video producer. I'm going to be the moderator, as Mark mentioned, for this initial community conversation on race, justice, and policing. As Mark had mentioned earlier, if you wish to ask a question, please email Community Engagement Coordinator MJ Lehman at Lehman, that's LAMON at edinamn.gov. As I was getting ready for tonight's conversation, I thought about my time with the City of Edina producing Beyond the Badge, a show that looks at the inner workings of the police and fire departments. And I realized that work opportunity gave me a chance to get to know Chief Nelson, Sergeant Vinny, and many of our Edina law enforcement staff. And to be honest, it completely changed the way I viewed policing. I saw firsthand how difficult the job is of a police officer. I listened, I empathized, and it taught me the value of keeping ourselves open to the experiences of others and the value of building relationships. And that's something I hope we can all do tonight together. So with that being said, I'm going to get us started. I want to thank all the panelists for their time tonight and their willingness to share their views about these issues. It's really to our direct benefit. Chief Nelson, you get the first question. So, Chief, how do we begin and continue this dialogue about race, justice, and policing after this meeting tonight?
forgot that mute thing. Sorry. The community conversation we're having tonight is a good beginning. Having police representatives at the table will provide us a great opportunity to listen and learn about the perspectives of other people on the panel. So we need to continue these conversations with our BIPOC community members, better understand their concerns and how we can work together in an effort to develop positive relationships and expand on our public trust.
Sounds great. And let's just jump right into it then. I'm going to start with Sabi. Sabi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You shared a little bit about your background, but being a young person of color in Edina, I think your experience is extremely valuable to hear.
All right, so I actually moved to Edina in 2018. I go to Edina High School here in Edina, and I'm a second-generation Pakistani immigrant, but I was born in Canada, so that was a fun experience. And then aside from that, I've just loved living in Edina and learning and being able to see other people's perspectives, because this is a really different community from where I've lived in the past, because I've lived in the Deep South in places like Arkansas and Kansas, and then I've also lived in a different place like Toronto, Canada. So Edina is a really different place for me, and I love seeing how other people interact here because it's a fun experience.
And Sabi, to that point, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit. What's kind of the differences that you've seen in how we engage about these kind of issues versus other places you've lived that you mentioned here?
And within America itself, I think Edina is probably the only community that I've been in that's addressed that there's an issue at all. Because where I lived in Arkansas, it was a primarily white community, and it was just ignored. There was not much conversation about it. I left Toronto when I was about 7, so I don't really remember much about that, but that was just home for me. There's not a lot to talk about there. And then in Kansas, it's similar to Arkansas. It wasn't really talked about, and anytime it was talked about, it was maybe like a conversation or two, and then it was over. But Edina is honestly the first place I've seen like further conversations taking place and actual action being taken.
And, again, sorry to harp on it a little bit, but as a person of color, what's your experience been with race justice and policing? How do those topics intersect in your life, or where have they made an impact that you could share?
I mean, I very clearly don't fit into most communities where I've lived because, for example, where I lived in Arkansas, it was, again, an extremely white community where Walmart US is located, so definitely stuck out there. And it was just interesting to see, like, you're walking around the neighborhood and people are staring at you because you don't look normal. But I would say in Edina, I feel like I fit in here. At school, there's a lot of diversity in the schools, and people acknowledge their diversity. They don't cover it up or pretend that they're not different. They acknowledge that they are. And I think that's something great about Edina because people are not ashamed of who they are, and they're quick to embrace where they're from and what their roots are.
Love it. I'll ask this to kind of wrap up your part here. What's an action step that you hope to take yourself, or you hope to have happen in the community to keep this conversation moving forward?
I think there definitely needs to be more education about the work minorities in the past have done, because even looking at school curriculum, a lot of the work is focused on what white Americans have done in the past, when there are minorities who have done so much big action that's being completely ignored. And I think like we need to take the time to address what has been done by others, because a lot of it is huge and monumental for America, and yet it's still ignored.
Good point. Thank you for sharing today. Gary Bridges, I want to jump right over and have you tell us a little bit about yourself. You can certainly respond to anything Sabi had to say.
No, he did an excellent job and very impressive for a young person. My name is Gary Bridges. I moved to Edina back in 2013, coming from a very small community in southern Minnesota, where I lived there practically for about 30-something years, 29, 30 years. The city itself is a city that maybe had 4 Black people within the city itself and a large Hispanic population. Once I was hired by the Edina Public School District, which I felt as though I have made it. I made it to the big league. Life is going to be good and great and happy. And so being employed with the Edina Public School District has given me the opportunity to work with a very versatile staff, as well as students, and live in this community itself has been a learning experience and growing experience for myself. I do have my my oldest son decided to migrate up here as well too, and my wife came after about 3 years after me being up here by myself, and I guess they
felt that I was a sad man that couldn't take care of myself, so they needed to come in and assist me. But being in Edina initially to me was again one of those, everyone outside of the metropolitan area looked at it. Oh wow, you work in Edina. Oh, you live in Edina. So it was one of those pride things, and so you kind of really uh, live that high life. And I don't know if people that have come out of very small communities realize what type of present it is when you mention the word Edina. And so I grew up down south. I born, raised, and lived in the deep south. And so I lived in a lot of various places that have given me the opportunity to interact with a wide variety of people. And so practically all my life, I kind of flew under the radar and being able to be sociable and be, meet people and just engage and have conversation. And I guess, I could be considered a people person. I love to talk. And you're going to have to cut me off. You're going to have to shut the mic off on me, to get me to shut up. But that's a little bit about me.
Love it, Gary. Thank you so much for that. Being in the community, and you mentioned something that I've consistently heard, even as someone who grew up here, that Edina is a destination place to work and play. And we can, go down that rabbit hole. What has the experience been like, though, now living here and being here? Do you feel welcome walking down the street? How has your engagement been with folks who serve in the law enforcement community? What has that been like for you?
Being in the position that I am in the district, working in the technology department, I do have the ability to work and engage with the resource officers. So each resource officer that come within the district, I do get to work with them quite a bit on security type things, and also with strategic plans for lockdown and procedures in that process within itself. So I get to know them and get to engage and work with them. About 4 years ago, that kind of changed. Not as far as the resource officer, it says, per se, but I was coming off the hill, as I call it, the Tavern on the Hill area, from Starbucks, getting my coffee, and I just kind of came to the intersection, and I noticed that an officer, happened to be there, turned and, going to work, and I didn't really pay any attention until I pulled into the parking lot, and the officer was actually following me. And so that right there and gave me this, like, okay, what is going on? I wasn't speeding anything. And so that really kind of, that particular incident kind of put a very cautious spin on how I interact with law enforcement. And after the gentleman on Xerxes that had the incident there, that even brought me even more isolated. There was a time that I used to get up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and go for walks, just for exercise, and that stopped because I did not want to put myself in a position of being stopped and asked, "What are you doing walking around in the neighborhood?" And being a person of color, where you do not see as many people of color and be able to interact. I go to the coffee shop that's across the street, and people are very friendly, nice, and everything. But it is also that impact of that initial profiling, as I'm going to call it as it is, because I did not violate any laws or anything like that, and that I was stopped, and I just didn't quite understand, and that kind of gave me a different perspective of, I didn't do my history, my research on Edina, and then I start to hear a little bit more and read a little bit more about the history of Edina, and that kind of lowered the presentation, the image that I've had grown to love, and it just kind of put a different spin on things.
And given that experience, what do you see as a way that we as a community, that, the city can kind of change that? What's a solution? What can be done to either build relationships or just make people feel more comfortable being in Edina?
I've heard and had conversation with people that lived here for years, that is even white people, that says, I still don't feel like a part of this community. Don't feel as welcome to this community. I met some great people along the way, by living here. And those are the people that I engage with. Those are the people I talk to. And those are the people that, to me, represent what Edina should be like and what it could be like. I kind of keep up with the local scene, what's going on here. And one thing that I really want to point out is the mayor. The mayor has gone through a great deal of effort to, I think, personally embrace and say, to open and allow outsiders and also allow people within the community itself, and whether people agree with that or not, but this is what I see. I believe that the mayor is doing a great job, and that's a start. When you have the city leaders within itself that is saying that, we are a community that welcomes all, regardless of how others may feel, but this is what our community represent, and this is who we are. And if people move into this community, it needs to be an open form of communication for all. And so, I know everything is not all, rosy and, great. However, I think that with the leadership of the city council and also the mayor and what the city is doing in this particular process and having these conversations within itself. And I really have to applaud the chief of police as well, too, because when I first moved here, I did not recognize any officers that was of color. And maybe I was wrong, maybe I just didn't see them. And I think the first time I saw a black officer, I was like, yay, okay, finally. That really brought joy to my heart, and it also made me feel as though it's a slow process, but however, maybe, it's time to lower the barriers of not trusting, because there's a big distrust from people of color. In particular, within the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a big distrust of law enforcement within this city. And I know it's all around and it's widely spread, but however, where I'm living at now, I received less. I knew every officer in, by the time that I came from. For 30 years, they know who you are and you know who they are. And that interaction is, I believe, also is a key. Yes, you can do community outreach programs with law enforcement. However, those have to be targeted, not just for white people, but also for people of color, to be able to engage and have these conversations. It's been one of those things that I would definitely, I don't know if it has, but I would definitely love to see that being a part of the process and an engagement within the community as well.
Thank you for that, Gary. Thank you for sharing. Hope, I'm going to move on to you. Hope Melton, would you mind just telling us about yourself?
To tell them.
You had it right. You got this.
There we go. Okay. I was going to say, when you're my age and somebody says, tell me about yourself, there's way more than anybody would want to hear. But one thing that people maybe don't know is that I've spent many more years as a social studies and history, and then taught in the higher education and adult education than I worked as an urban planner. So, and the other thing is that I've also had many years of experience living and traveling abroad. And that has really given me kind of a dual perspective on this country. I've also lived many different places in this country. And so I view America as an American, but I also feel somewhat somewhat as an outsider. I just wanted to mention a few formative experiences as they relate to race, justice, and policing. The first is that my dad was president of the Evanston School Board, and when he and the school board decided that they wanted to desegregate, this is Evanston, Illinois, desegregate Evanston schools ahead of the Brown versus Board of Education. I was about 10 years old, and this was my introduction to racial politics, and it was really something. But the school board prevailed, and Evanston was one of a handful of cities in this country that integrated ahead of Brown. In 1959, I graduated from one of the finest fully integrated schools in this country. So it can be done. It still ranks highly nationally. When I was between my junior and senior year in college at Northwestern, I joined a group called Operation Crossroads Africa. This was a forerunner to the Peace Corps. And we formed, it was run by Reverend James Robinson out in Washington. We formed a team of American black and white students, college students, and they paired us. We went to, it was called Upper Volta at that time in Africa, now called Guinea-Bissau, but we worked with a group of African students. Guinea-Bissau is a former French colony, so it was French-speaking. But with those African students, we lived with them, and we built a one-room schoolhouse out in the countryside outside of Ouagadougou, that is the capital. We also traveled a great deal in the Ivory Coast, in Ghana, and in Niger. That experience sort of blew my mind. I mean, there was something, everybody talked about culture shock. It was so different. But it really opened my eyes to differences in both race and culture. And then when I just was finishing my master's degrees at Northwestern, I met a Swede. We married, and that was the beginning of living and working 12 years in Sweden. Also, a very different country, although clearly European and Western. Sweden is still a much more equitable country than this one is. It has a very strong economy. And one of the things that I noticed right away is that there's a very strong sense of social responsibility and commitment to the greater good. So that when you hear about the COVID response in Sweden, you have to understand that it's a very different context than it would be in the United States. It was a social democratic country, and that means that it has a highly regulated free market economy. Okay? It's not state socialism. And it also has a very robust safety net. For example, my husband and I and our children were guaranteed cooperative housing ownership, a housing allowance, a child allowance when the kids were born, high quality affordable child care, sick child care, high quality universal health care, preschool and after school programs, and excellent public transportation. And I mention that because those are the basic, we call them in this country, public goods. Those are the basic building blocks of healthy human development. And I think that eventually that's where we have to go, because what we have now is very clearly not working. I taught conversational English for American corporations and Swedish for immigrants while I was there. When I divorced and returned to the United States, came back to Princeton, New Jersey, and got my master's. Then came out to the Twin Cities, and I had two very important experiences here as related to race justice and policing. The first was I was asked to be the executive director of the first pilot program of something called Success by Six Way to Grow, which was a program to promote healthy childhood development in disadvantaged communities. was a collaboration with Mayor Don Fraser, Honeywell, and the Minneapolis United Way. And the first program was in the Phillips neighborhood of Minneapolis. The goal was to reduce infant mortality and low birth weight. And we worked with neighborhood service organizations, and we had not a multidisciplinary, but a multiracial team that actually was from that neighborhood, that did home visits, and it was a very successful program that was then expanded to the north side of Minneapolis. The other one, and that one didn't involve the police to any great extent, but the other one did. It was the Ramsey County All Children Excel program. And this was a multifaceted, multi-jurisdictional, it was countywide. So it was schools, police departments, city governments, neighborhood organizations. It was a research-based public health approach to juvenile crime prevention. And it targeted children under 10 at high risk to become serious, chronic, and violent offenders. They did longitudinal research and found that chronic, serious, and violent offenders usually begin their careers about ages 8 or 9, and not 14, which is when most teenagers hit the criminal justice system. In any case, we worked very closely with the St. Paul Police Department, particularly the Juvenile Division. Mike Harrington at that time was head of that department. It was a great experience working with him. And I didn't know, we trained and worked with the juvenile officers, and I didn't know what to expect, what kind of people would be going into policing. But what I found was that these are people, I thought, if they hadn't become police, they would have become chaplains because they really wanted to help people. And I don't know what happens to police officers over their career. I think a lot of it has to do with the leadership of the departments and a lot of other factors. But that was an eye-opening experience. And they knew exactly who these high-risk families were. So did the schools. So we were able to successfully intervene with them. We committed to working with these children and families until they were 18 years of age. So both of those programs, I encountered the multi-generational impacts of racial segregation and social isolation, extreme poverty, and a fragmented, piecemeal, and uncoordinated social service system. And the impact of extreme poverty and mass incarceration on families was especially devastating. It also led me to a deep understanding of the ways that the neighborhood context impacts life trajectories, determining everything, physical and mental health, longevity, academic success, future earnings, and involvement or not with the criminal justice system. So there's been a lot of research that shows that where you grow up, your zip code, is the single strongest determinant of your life trajectory.
Hope, I'm going to jump in here. I want to ask you,
Sure.
You've shared a lot about your experiences. What is an action that our community can take, that individually we can take, that you've learned from all those experiences? What can we do now to make things better for everybody, in your opinion?
Well, one of the things that I want to say is that these issues of racial injustice and policing are not going to be solved at the individual level. They have to do with public policies and with political power. So we can all, I think it's very important that we confront this history, and we're very fortunate to have a wonderful, just many very talented writers of color now. Michelle Alexander, Keeanga Yamada Taylor, Latinx, I have the names here, I've written them down. But there are many, Abram Kendi, read, because they are so articulate and they're bringing forth this history that we have submerged. As you know, as a history and social studies teacher, I did not know this history. A very important book is Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law. This is how government has segregated our communities. Edina began as an integrated community. And when redlining occurred, it aimed both at people of communities of color, but also it destroyed integrated neighborhoods in this country. So that's another very important source. And then these conversations, I think, are very important. And we need to hear all of the voices. And then I think we need to have some kind of, we have a 2015 vision. I think we should look back at that. And then I think that we should create a vision of the kind of community that we want to be, and ask ourselves what we're willing to commit to achieve it. So those are some suggestions.
Thank you, Hel. Thank you for that. All right, let's move on. Arnie, I know you, you know me, but tell us about yourself and just share more about you.
Thanks, Dietrich. I'll try to give you a short story on my bio here. I'm really a local person. Grew up in Minneapolis. 1952, we lived in South Minneapolis. My dad had left. Homes were increasing in value. The rent went up to $35 a month. We couldn't afford it, so my mother and sister and I were evicted. Fortunately, the Glendale housing platform was just being finished in southeast Minneapolis, and we were lucky enough to get an apartment there. And that was a great neighborhood. We had close neighbors who were people of color, old, young, and my mother was able to land a job. My sister and I got through school, had a stable place to live, and so we were really in great shape. That's because the housing was affordable. It was adjusted to the income that someone had. So today I'm 77 years old. I live here in Edina. Woohoo! That's a big deal for me. In 1965, I graduated from the University of Minnesota, was a high school teacher for 3 years in Red Wing, and saw how our students from the Prairie Island Reservation had to deal with being in a public high school there. It wasn't all pleasant. After teaching high school, which I didn't really enjoy very much, I worked in business for a banking company and then for Honeywell for a few years, and then was employed at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and I had a great experience there for 32 years. And for the last 22 years, I was administrator in the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine, which has 5 separate schools within the college. And that was just a great experience because we did a lot of training and education, not only for the employees and the staff, but also for the student populations in each one of those schools within the college. So now my wife and I live here in the Edinburgh area in Edina. My wife is Barbara Lavalure, and she was on the Arts and Culture Commission for 6 years. I was on the Human Rights and Relations Commission for 6 years. And we both are very committed to this community and want to do things that we can to make it better than we found it. So although I got the Tom Loy Award in 2018 from the city, which I cherish that. I currently have been serving with Mark on the 2020 Census Complete Count Committee, and I'm also very active in the Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing with Hope, and then volunteer a lot with AERP for things in elder justice and other areas like that. And I really like Edina because, like Gary said, we have a mayor who listens, and the council people also have been very responsive to community situations. I am really impressed with the way Edina manages things. And when I look at affordable housing and I think, what can we do with affordable housing in Edina? I know that whatever we can do is going to be a stellar example for other communities to follow. Edina never does something halfway. So the progress this community has made in the last few years, I think, has just been telling, and it's going to be a beacon for other communities to see how things are done. And I'm anxious in my neighborhood where I live. You know, I've got the Yorkdale townhomes just a block from me, and they're my kind of people. We have a lot of immigrants there, and I see a lot of people of color. And the same thing in the Park Lawn area where we have a lot of immigrant population living. There's bus traffic going around here, the connector buses, and then the buses express downtown Minneapolis are just populated by, when we got people going to their offices, they're populated by a lot of people that just reflect the diversity of this neighborhood in Southdale. So I really appreciate that, and I'm very interested in just continuing on with some of these efforts we've got on dealing with, you know, our diversity, whether it's in sports, by gender, by race, by ability, by age, and all these other categories. It's just really critical for us to make sure we're bringing people together. And I like what our police officers have said in terms of having our community engagement officers out and about. I like to get somebody over here at Edinburgh, with the townhomes at Edinburgh, because we've got 392 units on about 2 square blocks of property here. And it's a great way to have that connection with us. A lot of us are elders over here, so it's not uncommon to see an ambulance stop and somebody needing help. Occasionally some other disturbance or difficulty, but the police presence and our fire and rescue people are just outstanding. And I think it's just a matter of getting all that tuned into the many diverse subsets of our population in this part of the city.
Sounds like, you know, becoming more interconnected is kind of an aspiration that you would have for our community. What kind of other actions do you think that either the department could take or the community could take in kind of bringing everyone together?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's something that I really put a fair amount of time into. And I do have notes I prepared and got them all set up so I can just send copies to Heidi. But you know, the race problem, wherever we have it in this country, has got a lot of symptoms, and this doesn't make me proud. But if you want to talk about, you know, is there a problem with it? Look at the statistics: infant mortality, diabetes, asthma, academic achievement, income. Income disparities are stunning, absolutely stunning. Life expectancy, COVID-19 infections, COVID-19 deaths, incarceration rates. We just have been dealing with ignoring this for so long. It's like people are numb to it, and yet we really have to get a handle on it for all of our communities. And again, I think Edina is a community that can do that better than a lot of other communities. We've got resources, we've got a better depth of understanding, I think, a lot of these things, and we just have to be, as the lady who was in the morning paper here the other morning, a bright blue outfit I can remember she was wearing, but she's got some kind of a business called Woke, and she's trying to be sure that people are woke or woken from whatever they are dealing with to realize what's going on around us. Even more of a concern today, really today, is this. This is a copy of the presidential order of September 22nd that forbids federal agencies to spend money on diversity training. If we were a federal agency, we could not have this session tonight. It would be illegal. There wouldn't be funding for it. So University of Iowa has had to cancel diversity programs on 2 of their campuses because of it, because there were federal funds involved. So it's very disturbing to me to hear that kind of activity taken. You know, we've gone through the mid-'60s with voting rights and civil rights, and it's just it's hurtful to see what's happening today with the backward moves we're making, and the way voter suppression is happening in Texas and Wisconsin. I'm sorry to go on about that, but it's all a reflection of this racism, and people don't want to have it talked about like that, but it really is.
It sounds like, and this is an open question for all four of you, it sounds like a lot of people feel uncomfortable these days, especially talking about a topic like police, race, and what justice looks like, what it means. What do all of you make of that aspect of the challenge of getting people who would just as soon avoid having this conversation to actually come to the table and talk with others about this? And feel free to openly chat.
I believe that Arnie and Hope really touched on some past history of segregation within this country. This is something that has been going on forever. It's been more exposed now because of media coverage and also because of these little video cameras or phones that we have. So a lot more has been a lot more exposed. I always say that it doesn't impact you until it impacts you with that. And one, do not bring attention to things in their life unless it has something, that impact them, something that disturbed them greatly to a point that it moved them. However, when you do not engage, you do not acknowledge, life is good for you. And life is pretty bland. It's safe. It's your isolation, your world of, I can work with people of color, I can go to school with people of color. However, I can go back to my community, which is whatever community color that is. And so you're pretty much isolating. When you open up the door of welcoming and engaging, and to me, that right there, it stimulates that conversation. It opened up that door of welcome. I remember one day that I was in the coffee shop, and I believe it was a assistant fire chief came in, and he looked at me and said, "Here, I'm going to buy your coffee today for you." To me, that's like, okay, that opens up that door. Simple little cup of coffee, but yeah, that also gives me this feeling that, Edina prides itself on being the top, the best. However, we don't like the resources. We don't like the effort. It's just a matter of doing it. And yes, we are always going to have those people that clings to their belonging and their possession and not open up out of whatever fear there is of letting others within their world, their surrounding. And that, to me, right there, is one of those steps that is very critical and important. People of color are, on a day-to-day basis, minute by minute, have to take on a different persona to be welcome, to be liked, to have a conversation out of our own community with white people or people that doesn't, it's not like them. However, it is very challenging for a white person to let down their guard and to change and to engage in that conversation and open it with, open arms. And, to me, that is one of those things to where we need to do a better job of it. People not have to drop who they are or change who they are to make non-colored people feel welcome. To me, it should be the other way around. Because there's more white people than there are people of color. And so, if anything, people of color should be more threatened and fearful than white people.
And then I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Sabi, go for it. Yeah, and then Hope after.
Okay. Going off of Gary said, I would say people have become too complacent in accepting action. Because as he was saying, things happen and people just accept it as the norm. People are too comfy and they just accept anything that happens. and the community itself isn't ready to start calling bad actions out yet. But discussion about what's happening needs to be normalized around the community, because as it is, people will see someone do something and then they'll assume that's just what's supposed to happen, especially regarding racial discrimination. And conversations thus far have not been ready to have been discussed, but now I think there's definitely a change that's been going through the community, and it's time for discussion to happen.
Hope, did you have something to add? You're muted, Hope.
Okay, sorry. I just want to say again that we really need to move away. We've been stuck on this idea that racism has to do with bad people that have bad ideas in their heads. And what we need to understand, and what is coming out now in with many of these Black and Latinx writers, is that this is a structural, systemic, institutional problem. So it's not as much about personal attitudes as it is about political power. It's less a matter of personal prejudice and moral deficiency than of public policies working in concert with the directives of free market capitalism. Segregation, for example, is a spatial expression of the American caste system. The whole notion of racism is a hierarchy. It posits a hierarchy of human worth, so that some people are worth less than others. And that is antithetical to our Judeo-Christian notion, and that's enshrined in the Bill of Rights, that all men and women are created equal by God. But again, to bring it back to segregation, which is one of these policies that's been produced, that's been promoted by our government and by banks and the real estate industry, is what that does is to encourage negative stereotypes. It inhibits our capacity for empathy and solidarity, and it promotes very high, what Arnie talked about, the very high levels of inequality in this country, not to mention mass incarceration. So neighborhoods of concentrated poverty and social isolation are devastating for the people that live there. We must desegregate. We must integrate our communities, which doesn't mean that if people of color or are happy in their neighborhood where they want to live, they don't have to leave, but that everyone should have the opportunity to live anywhere they want to, and particularly to be able to participate in the life and the resources of a community like Edina.
Arnie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I guess all I can say is, our work on affordable housing, one of the results of that is that Aon, the affordable housing developer, is going to be putting up a 70-unit affordable housing building about maybe 2 blocks from where I live. And I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be a great neighbor for us, and we are going to be great neighbors for them. The condominium complex that my wife and I live in here in Edinburgh is really not a high-end condo. These condominiums were built in the mid-'80s, and they are very well kept. Our association fees are a little higher because of that, and the maintenance is going to be there. But we don't have a lot of the fancy amenities, and I think some of these units were offered as affordable housing when the development was constructed. And this whole area, the Centennial Lakes and this place, this area of the development, including some parts of Southdale, we're just benefiting because the gravel pit ran out of gravel when they were finishing Highway 100 and 494 and 35W. So what do you do with a gravel pit that's always got water in the bottom? Well, you make a lake and put a park around it. I thought that was pretty brilliant. And now we're getting the village feel, which was part of the original designer's intention. And it is really like that when we can walk around and be in our neighborhood. But we need to have that be for everybody. When I walk around Centennial Lakes in the mornings when I can, and it's not snowing 5 inches of snow, I just try to say hi to everybody. And with a mask on, it's a little harder. You at least wave at them. But to have that sense of neighborhood, and there are 392 units in this complex, I know we are getting a larger number of people of color, and that's just great. I just welcomed a lady who moved into a third floor unit in our building, and made sure I welcomed her and told her our neighbors get together from time to time when we don't have a pandemic going on, and if she has questions, let me know. I'm glad to help. Directions to local things, or doing this and that with a mailbox or garage, or where's the dumpster and all that. So part of it's just talking to and listening to people, and I like to do that when I walk around the neighborhood. Walk over on York Avenue and talk to some of the people I see, and Hope will tell you, we've had listening sessions over there from Edina neighbors from affordable housing, and when I was on the Human Rights Commission, we did the same thing. And we had a few stories of people, some of the men being stopped in their cars, and the first question they were asked was, "What are you doing in Edina?" Well, he said, "I live across the street over here in Yorkdale Townhomes." Yeah. So, that was a little awkward, but I'm guessing that our police staff is getting better and more sensitive to that, so I would hope that. And I think that, probably 98% of all the police staff, including the people in the office and the dispatch and everybody else that makes that team work, they're heroes. And we get a few people that get out of line sometimes and lose their temper and whatever. And that makes it tough on all the rest of you. So we need people to keep the peace. I will, for one, would say we don't want to have a police enforcement department. We want a peacekeeper department or peace officers. I much prefer that.
Dietrich, I'd like to throw a question to the panel.
Yes, sir.
When we have the political scene that is, one individual that is saying, white women, I'm savior of suburban neighborhood. Help. I'm helping you. Help me. You don't want these type people coming into your neighborhood. What message is the community itself sending to say, no, that's not what Edina is about. We're more welcoming. I don't really hear or see that message of being a little bit more like, whoa, let's stop this here. Let's, project a different message. We're not that suburban neighborhood. And I really feel, again, what is it that we are doing? And I kind of have to step back a little bit and say that it does start with an individual movement. What are you doing as an individual to really help engage and keep moving this forward? Because I don't want to be this. I don't want this to be this train that move and chug along, and all of a sudden it stop at this one station and never start back up again. I look at our education system. How many teachers do we have that is in the classroom that represent the student population? How can we get our, other than the city itself, our other community organizations to move forward as well too? How can we, as a community and individuals, engage in that conversation and push that forward? I told you to turn my mic off when you get ready. When I get out there.
Good, Gary. Would anybody like to respond?
I go out there.
I can't respond to the school situation, but I would say that with the leadership of the mayor and the city council to achieve their affordable housing goals, I think this community has made great progress, frankly. There's more to be made, but we are definitely, for about 20 years, we did not much at all. And we have made great progress in the last 3 years. So, and another thing I want to say is I think the Greater Southdale Small Area Plan is really a vision for a cosmopolitan, high diversity community that's walkable and bikeable, and where people can really come together and create communities. So that was a huge achievement. So I think we're making progress, at least in housing, and with increasing demographic diversity. Definitely.
Yeah, because I definitely see the complexes being built and going up, and I look and say, whoa, are these affordable? And I'm like, okay, where are these people coming from that will be occupying? Because I look around Edina, and there is a lot of building and a lot of apartment complexes that's going up. However, what percentage of the negativity of Edina history has also made people think, do I really want to live in Edina? As a person of color, is one of those things. And I don't know personally what effort that has been put in to promote, to make sure that, again, and I keep, and I apologize for keep going on this, I'm harping about making one feel welcome here in Edina. It could be very intimidating. Because of the housing costs around here, and the cost of apartment can be very, very intimidating if the individual don't necessarily have the finance. And that's one of those kind of deterrent thing that people get, left behind in. And that, again, make it somewhat kind of an injustice to those individuals as well. And so it's another one of the things. It's great to build, but who are you building it for?
I've got a thought about that. This is an idea I came up with, but I think whenever someone signs a rental agreement on a property in Edina or a purchase agreement, one of the things the city should be doing is getting that person enrolled in some kind of a Welcome to Edina course. Make it brief, make it fun, but let people know exactly what Gary is talking about. Talk to your neighbors, respect your neighbors, welcome new people when you see them, especially if they don't look like you.
Yeah.
It's just so simple.
Right.
I think the same kind of a piece of the curriculum in the public schools would be just great. And I'm going to send my list of all my ideas to Heidi, but it includes preschool and police officers visiting the preschool and daycare areas with a real intention to have that be a way of letting them know these are people who will help you, and just have this just put into the early education so that people learn respect and awareness of who these people are in their uniforms. It's so basic, and we leave it. We don't do that. We just think it's all going to be just fine, and people grow up with suspicions or think it's foreign. Or the only time I know police is when I got stopped for a speeding ticket or whatever. So we just have a lot of work to do, and there's so many resources, to have, and the daily newspaper is a great resource. I can do newspaper clippings, 3 or 4 articles a day on things happening in either racism or abuse of human rights or something. It's just unfortunately it's just there every day.
All right.
But now with these kinds of programs like tonight, how much inexpensive education is available to the whole community right here. And I'll send, Heidi a list of websites that are going to be just great resources for people. And the public library. It's a public library at Hennepin County.
Arnie, I'm sorry, I'm going to
Focus
interrupt you
talking
here.
about books, and that's where they can go. Sorry about that. All right.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We got about 15 minutes left, so I just want to make sure that some of the questions that folks are sending in can be asked. So the first one, a lot of these, I suppose, is unsurprisingly, are for Chief Nelson and Sergeant Benny. The first one is the Minnesota legislature passed an omnibus bill requiring police to undergo autism training. Autism Society of Minnesota does this training. Will the Edina Police Department undergo it, Chief? I don't know if you know the answer to that yet, but...
There we go. As far as the autism training, yes, that is in the police reform bill that passed through. And right now we've already implemented our first training course in that with Patrol Online that the officers will be completing prior to the end of the year. But I know we will be looking into other options because there'll be more than this one class that we'll be taking, but we wanted to get started on something right away.
Excellent. All right. Well, the second question is right back to you, Chief. This person asks, for the police department's future actions, the chief didn't give an update on the rollout of body cameras. Is that going to be covered? Are we going to... do you have an update on the body camera situation?
Sure. Wasn't on the agenda, but I have an update. So, the body camera project, we started this in 2016 with research and trying to figure out what would be the best system to fit our department. And it also has to tie in with our in-squad video systems. So we had to replace our in-squad video systems first, and we went with a company called WatchGuard. And we went with them primarily because they had an excellent body cam option for us that we could integrate in. So after we made that decision, then it was just a matter of getting the money in the budget to purchase the body cams. And the money was approved for the 2020 budget. And we ordered our body cams early 2020, and then COVID hit, and civil unrest hit, and a lot of agencies across the country want to buy body cams now. And so our vendor is just packed with orders and trying to implement body cams across the nation. Where we are at right now is our body cameras have come in. We have them. We have the charging stations all ready to go. What we're waiting for is we need our vendor, WatchGuard, to come out and actually get everything hooked up and implement the system, along with the data storage. So that's a little bit out of our hands, so we're waiting for our vendor. Last I heard, we did have a date, I think about the second week of December, that would happen. So we are still planning on having body cameras implemented by the end of this year.
Thanks, Chief. Not surprisingly, here's another one for you. Has a series of community conversations like this one been scheduled? If so, when will they happen? Someone mentions that you had alluded to having more of these conversations with people of color in the community.
Yes, I was going to say I may have to defer back to Heidi Lee on this one. We have this first one scheduled. We're calling it our first one and more to come. But I don't believe anything has been formally scheduled or figured out as to who we want on that.
Okay. Sergeant Benny and Chief Nelson, here's another one. What type of crimes are happening in school? What is the profile of the student that are engaged in the activity, and what does the data say? That's a challenging one without, I suppose, looking into it a little bit more, but
as I say, I'm not quite sure about crime trends in the schools right now. I'd had to defer to my SROs, but Sergeant Benny, do you have any intel on that?
I haven't. No, this year I haven't heard anything. I was talking to our SROs recently, kind of asking what's going on, and they didn't really have any. There's nothing that's screaming as far as crime trends or anything, and even like simple thefts. Obviously, kids can make some bad decisions from time to time, but I have not heard about those recently either. So, with the way that they're conducting classes right now, and an altered schedule, that might be decreasing some of the things that are going on out there right now.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any assaults or anything like that have been going on this year. I know with the student population being down, there's just that many less kids at school right now.
Is there any demographic data for participants in the Citizen Police Academy available to share?
Not sure I understand the question. No.
Yeah, I guess the question is asking what sort of demographic data is available for those who choose to participate in the Citizens Police Academy or Citizens Academy program?
As far as the makeup of the participants, or
yeah, that seems to be how that's how the question was phrased. I'm sorry, Chief, can't offer any more clarity than that, but.
And I don't know that off the top of my head, Sergeant Venny. Do you?
Yo.
Anyone has the ability to apply, to participate in the Citizens Academy. I don't know that we've ever tracked our attendees from that standpoint. So it's a good question. But
Sure.
all of the everything that we ask for our applicants are.
And for some reason, Dave, it sounds like your audio is cutting out, and I'm not sure why. Can everybody else hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks, Chief. Sergeant, sorry about that. This next question is for Hope and Arnie, and Arnie kind of already talked about it. How many homes has Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing provided or is in the process of providing as affordable housing?
Well, I think we've got the 70 is a certainty. I think Aon is going to be doing demolition here soon and getting that started when spring comes around. Hope, did we do was there a small project that was done in one of the areas towards the center of Edina last year or 2 years ago?
Oh, well, they're all together. I think it's over 200 units. Those are rental units mostly. I don't know the exact number. I'd have to look it up. It changes from time to time. We have the Edina Housing Foundation, 100% affordable building over at 70th and Cahill. I can get that number.
I think it's just in recent years. I think many of the units that are called affordable are kept at about could be 80% of average median income.
Well, 50 to 60%.
If it's 50 to 60, but then they have if they're in a bigger development, like developing 100 properties, they may have 15 that are affordable, but they'll last and be affordable for 15 years. Then they go back to market rate, and that's you lose your advantage at that point. The Aon property will be affordable for at least 40 years and possibly much longer than that, just like
and the same is true of the Edina Housing Foundation. But the person to ask about how many new units of affordable housing we built and how many units we preserved is Stephanie Hawkinson. She has up-to-date information on that.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Chief, you have another question here. And it's, what are you and your officers doing to have Edina be a more welcoming community? You have special social justice training planned.
I guess to be a more welcoming community, I would defer more to our community engagement programs. We try to do so much of that absent COVID this year, but in previous years and hopefully next year, just being out in the community as much as we can. And we want neighborhoods to register their neighborhoods so we can assign a neighborhood engagement officer to them. So they have that personal contact and liaison, that's someone they can ask questions and feel more comfortable with. When we do the neighborhood engagement officer events, normally the officers are showing up in just a polo shirt that says Edina Police. They don't have their full uniform on, so they are more approachable. And they can engage in those conversations and casual conversations and then it just makes it a fun event for everyone, including the officer. But that would be our primary things that we run our focus on as far as being welcoming.
Thanks, Chief. Here's another demographics question. How many people of color are on the police force, and how many females are on the force as well?
Currently, we have, I remember correctly, we're in the middle of hiring now, but I believe we have 55 sworn officers. Of the 55 sworn officers, 2 are people of color and 8 are female.
All right. This next question asks, what support does the police department need from the community to support their work, support your work?
A lot of our support comes through, for unbudgeted expenses and programs, comes through the Edina Crime Prevention Fund. And that has been a great resource for us. And they do a lot of donation raising or fundraising and all that events for us. But whenever people ask, well, can we contribute money to the police department? I always recommend, why don't you contribute it to the Edina Police or Edina Crime Prevention Fund, because basically that money comes back to the Edina Police Department to support some of our community engagement programs. And then when we have unexpected expenses come up for equipment that aren't in a budget, instead of having to wait a year or 2 to get that money in a budget, the Crime Prevention Fund will often donate that money so we can make a purchase of equipment that is valuable for us.
Thanks, Chief. This next question is open to the entire panel. This person writes, we, Edina, are creating our own segregated community by keeping low-income, affordable housing being concentrated in one area of Edina and not throughout many neighborhoods, reinforcing the idea of not in my backyard attitudes and practices. Would anyone care to comment on that?
Well, I feel like, oh, sorry, go ahead, Hope.
No, you go ahead, Sabi. You go ahead.
Okay, well, I feel like that is true to some extent with housing. I think the schools have done a relatively good job trying to, remedy that, because Edina schools themselves are not just, the schooling system itself does not just apply to Edina. I know there are quite a few Minneapolis kids and kids that go to, that live in other areas of the city, and, around the Twin Cities. I think that's done a relatively good job of trying to, expand the openness no matter where you live or what your financial circumstance is. However, at the end of the day, housing is still going to be an issue because the city is broken down into more or less high-income places and lower-income places. And as short of the affordable housing systems, there's not much that can be done immediately. There needs to be long-term discussions to remedy that.
Yeah, and it has very much to do with zoning. The very same year that redlining and racial covenants were outlawed, something called race-neutral measures, that is zoning, was implemented both within the cities but more within suburbs. So 93% of Edina land is reserved for single-family homes. And so affordable housing, according to the zoning code right now, can only be built on areas in commercial areas or around areas that are slated for development. Edina Neighbors for Affordable Housing would like to see affordable housing throughout the city, but that's very difficult to do now because of the price of land. So we just tried to put 2 affordable single-family homes into Dugan Plaza. That failed, and I think frankly, for climate reasons too, because when the price of land is very high, it raises the price of housing, and so you are forcing out people that work in Edina and would also like to live here. You force them to go further and further out, which makes more and more cars and more air pollution. So it's a very complex topic, and I think the questioner is exactly right. It's a concern of ours, but as Sabi said, it's going to take time. And I understand the opposition in single-family neighborhoods to affordable housing, particularly multifamily housing, because nothing is guaranteed in this society. Not housing, not education, not health care. I mean, none of that is guaranteed affordable in this country. And as a result, a lot of people achieve that through their investment in their home. That's a major wealth building tool. So anything that is perceived to threaten that investment is it's taboo. I mean, it's just not, homeowners don't allow that to happen. And so, it's a really tough thing to crack, but I think it has to do, I think we need to think bigger picture about why we become so financially dependent upon private property and the increase in housing values as a wealth building tool. Because what that does when you exclude, we have systematically excluded people from living in Edina historically. And the same thing has happened in Minneapolis, and it leads to the wealth gap, which means, you just don't have the money to send your kids to school, to save for your retirement and so forth. So it's a very complicated picture.
Yep. And with that note, guys, we are 2 minutes beyond our scheduled time tonight. I just want to thank you all for participating in this first conversation. We can hopefully continue it on later on a second meeting, perhaps even in person. But I want to respect everyone's time, and again, just thank you all for being here and being willing to talk about these issues openly. So, Mark, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right.
Can't hear you, Mark. Can't.
No, you're muted.
You're not muted, Mark, or you weren't muted, but.
Maybe shorten your earphone plug. Oh, can't hear you. Is there a microphone on your computer?
Right.
Good evening, everyone. I know that Commissioner Felton is having some audio issues, so I just wanted to step in and give you a reminder that, as folks, there are some questions that may not have been answered on tonight's panel. We will have an opportunity to follow up on those questions and make comments about tonight's events on the Better Together Edina.com for the next week. And so the online conversation will be available until October 28th. Before we log off, I do want to thank everyone, whether you participated on the panel or as a moderator or asked questions in view tonight, for your participation and your engagement in this start of the conversation on race, justice, and policing. As I was listening to the conversation, there was many different complexities when you think about all of the topics that people share. So this is going to be an ongoing process of folks wanting to share their experience and having the courage to say their perspective. And so I hope that you have enjoyed this community conversation on race, justice, and policing. And on behalf of everyone that has taken place or participated in this, I want to thank you for watching and participating, and have a great night.